Should land surveyors understand real estate law? You're going to get a different answer to that question depending on the land surveyor you ask. I'm not 100% positive, but I suspect the majority of land surveyors would probably answer that question in the negative. So they would tell you no, land surveyors don't need to know real estate law, or they shouldn't try and learn about real estate law. There is a minority, and I include myself in this minority, that think it's very important for land surveyors to understand real estate law. And I'll be honest with you, I think the land surveyors that tell you that's not important are either one, ignorant, or two, like that answer because it excuses them from a responsibility to learn the law, which is learning the law and understanding real estate laws is not easy. That involves a significant investment on the land surveyor's part. But I think it's important, and I want to explain why it's important. You know, that this question came up. This question came up with when I read an article that Jeff Lucas wrote. It was about the way one of our testing organizations defines land surveying and its relationship to boundary surveying. And it's a good article. I posted it on LinkedIn. I think Mr. Lucas had some valid points. Mr. Lucas is one of my surveying heroes. I have a few. He's one of them. Dave Woolley's one. Evan Page is one. Steve Parrish is one of my survey heroes. And Jeff Lucas is one. He's a unique individual. He's a land surveyor and an attorney. I only know a few of those. Paul Mabry is another one, land surveyor and an attorney. I think those are really special people, people that are able to do that become a land surveyor and a land attorney. There's only a few because that's a real challenge, intellectual challenge. But those people that do that, men and women that do that, are really gems in the surveying profession. And so Jeff Lucas is one of those. And so he wrote an article that kind of prompted this question in my mind. Should land surveyors understand real estate law? So I want to try and explain why I think they should. So I should tell you that when I was learning to be a land surveyor, when I was going to college almost 20 years ago, there was kind of this thought or this common idea in land surveying that land surveyors had no business being involved in real estate law, knowing anything about unwritten rights, that was the domain of land attorneys, and all land surveyors were supposed to do was measure. And I kind of call those folks that believe that the measurement purists. So they kind of, they bow down at the altar to measurement. Measurement's really important. It's one of the reasons why surveyors have the role they do in our real property system here in the United States. But measurements are just one form of evidence, of many, many different kinds of evidence. And so when I was being trained as a land surveyor, there was kind of this idea that land surveyors should know and understand the law. Now, I was fortunate or blessed to attend a college program run by Dave Dorsett in Northwest Montana that did not subscribe to that idea. And so my education as a land surveyor included some pretty extensive legal training. So I was taught legal principles, basic principles of real property law in my coursework. We were taught to do legal research. I actually spent time in the law library as a land surveying student and was taught how to use a law library. And then I was taught, we researched cases, we made presentations on cases, we briefed cases, and then we were taught to try and understand and apply case law to the work of the boundary surveyor. So a really valuable thing I learned, one of the most important things I learned in college, and I appreciate Dave Dorsett included that in his program. So I come from that background, and I deeply believe that boundary surveying and private land use planning are their own speciality, and that to be good at those things requires a huge investment in understanding the law, and that many surveyors fail to make that investment, and those surveyors have no business being boundary surveyors. So there are a lot of, I'm going to call them construction surveyors for lack of a better term. There's a lot of construction surveyors that are very good at measurement, but know little or nothing about the law. They know enough about the law to pass the test. And those kinds of surveyors shouldn't be doing boundary surveying. They cause problems for their clients. They cause problems for other boundary surveyors like me. And you'll know if you talk to a real boundary surveyor, you'll know if you bring this topic up, they're going to get pretty passionate about it, because as boundary surveyors, we frequently see substandard boundary surveyors done by construction surveyors that have no business being boundary surveyors. Now, to be fair, I don't have any business building skyscrapers. That's not my specialty. And I wouldn't attempt to do it. If you called here tomorrow and wanted me to build a stadium or a skyscraper, I would tell you I'm not qualified. And I think a lot of boundary surveyors are like that. But there's probably boundary surveyors that build skyscrapers when they shouldn't, and there are certainly construction surveyors that do boundary surveys when they shouldn't. So, if you're going to hire a land surveyor to help you with boundary surveying and land title and land planning stuff, should they understand real estate law? Absolutely. The answer is yes. So, why? Why is it important that your boundary surveyor and land planner understand basic real estate law? So, to answer that, before I answer that question, I'm going to tell you four real life stories that have happened in my practice just in the last 6 months that illustrate why it's important. And then I'll talk about the lessons or the principles from those 4 stories illustrate. Now, before I tell you the stories, let me say I think there is a line that a boundary surveyor can cross if he's not careful, where he starts to practice law. And you don't want to do that. So, for example, I've written an article before that talks about things a land surveyor should not put in his land description. If he's preparing a land description for an easement, for example, let's say an access easement, his client or an attorney or title professional may ask him to put things in his land description that don't belong there. So, for example, language about the way the easement can be used or how the easement's going to be maintained. Those things shouldn't be in your land description. They should go in the deed jacket, and they should be put there by an attorney. So there is a line that can be crossed, and surveyors don't want to cross that. However, as I've gotten older and I've worked more and more with land attorneys, I've also come to understand that because real estate law is so complex, most land attorneys don't have time to fully understand land surveying and laws related to land surveying and land planning, and they need our help. And so oftentimes, as an expert witness or a consultant, I am providing assistance and, to some degree, legal advice or an understanding of the laws that apply to a land surveyor. I'm explaining that to an attorney. So there is a line that you shouldn't cross as a land surveyor, but in most cases, land surveyors would benefit their clients more if they knew more about the law. So let's talk about those 3 stories. So, and they're going to be quick. First one, we just had 10 acres of pasture land in Central California, a couple of major encroachments. One side there was a 55-foot encroachment. The other side there was a 35-foot encroachment. Doing a survey for a client, find these large encroachments, come back, tell the client, hey, we got some issues, we need to clean this up. The client doesn't know what to do. We give them some options. They start talking to the neighbors. Neighbors start getting nasty. Unfortunately, on one side, one of the neighbors was a local government agency, and the local government agency just starts ramrodding my client, to get their bulldozer out. In fact, I was on the ground when the local agency staff were there telling my client what they were going to bulldoze down, and I told that local agency, I said, hey, you need to turn off your bulldozer, and you need to be really careful here, because you don't know what you're doing, and you're going to get yourself in a lawsuit. And so, thankfully, the bulldozer stopped, the chainsaw stopped, and I told my client, I said, you need to go hire an attorney. I said, I'm going to recommend a land attorney to you. I suggest you get him on retainer. This is going to get nasty. Despite my best efforts to keep it from getting nasty, I could see it was going to get nasty. I said, you're going to need some legal help getting this sorted out. Okay, so that's the first story. Here's the second story. I had a client doing a small commercial subdivision, one of our local cities, and for whatever reason, the city, the staff we were dealing with at the local city they were fighting this. They were dragging their feet. They were non-responsive. And so part of what we had to do in that situation, there was 2 attorneys involved. There was the client's business attorney, and then the client had hired a land attorney specifically to manage this land subdivision process, and we were working for the land attorney. And so we ended up in a role where we had to help both land attorneys research and interpret the local municipal code that related to the subdivision, and how it was going to be processed by the city, make sure that the client was hitting all the right benchmarks as they moved through the process. There were land title problems on this particular piece of property. The title company had made some mistakes. The deed was not the most current vesting deed. There was a mistake, pretty major mistake in that. There was some old abandoned easements that needed to be quitclaimed. And so we had a really big role in that project in working with the client's legal experts to get all those issues taken care of. And that is something those attorneys would have struggled with on their own. They needed a good land surveyor to help them understand that process. The third story is we had a hilltop parcel in the Bay Area, sits up on a ridgetop, beautiful parcel. Didn't have legal access to the public road. And I had the client, we've been going back and forth with the client's attorney trying to figure out how we're going to fix this problem. And the client's attorney's trying to figure out how they fix this the cheapest way possible. And so there's been some back and forth. The client got a hold of me last week and said, "Hey, Landon, what do you think about this approach? I think it could save a lot of money." And I looked at the approach and I said, "Hey, be great if we could use that approach, but here's some facts on the ground, some reasons why I don't think your legal approach is going to work based on the facts on the ground. I'm not telling you what to do. You're the attorney, but here's some things to think about from my perspective." The attorney came back to me the next day, said, "Holy crap, you're right. Man, I'm sure glad you pointed those facts out on the ground. You're right, this isn't going to work. We're going to have to take a different approach. Let's brainstorm on what that different approach could be." Okay, the last example is we had a friend of a friend that owned some farmland here in the Central Valley, and they had a conservation easement in place. I think they're under what we call a Williamson Act contract, and they wanted to build a second home on the property, but they need to figure out how that's going to work with the rules of their Williamson Act contract, and they're going to need to modify the conservation easement, and there's a set of rules about how they can do that. And so they came to us and were asking for some help. How do we do this? We're reading the Williamson Act contract. We're trying to understand at the county level how they administer those rules. We're working with the nonprofit that held the conservation easement, trying to understand their rules. They were struggling to understand their own process. They had a poorly defined process for how you can modify a conservation easement. They know that you can do it, but they don't understand all the issues involved. So we were offering them some advice about how the best way to get that done. So all four of those examples, I as a land surveyor, as a boundary surveyor and a private land planner, am having to research, read, and interpret law and help attorneys understand how the law applies to facts on the ground. Again, very careful about how I do that. We're almost always working with an attorney when we do that. But that's a really important role that land surveyors play, because a lot of attorneys, even if they specialize in real estate law, there's so much to learn. A lot of attorneys are very concerned with what the rules of the game are when you go to court, and the different things they have to do to make sure their client plays by those rules. And so sometimes they don't always have time to understand the nuances of the law and how it applies to survey and land title. And so if you're a good boundary surveyor, good private land planner, you can understand the law, you can help your attorney with those things. So here's 3 reasons why a good boundary surveyor or private land planner needs to understand real estate law. 3 reasons. She needs to be able to advise you as the client on when is the best time to hire an attorney. There are times when you're going to be working with a land surveyor, you don't have an attorney involved, but you need to get an attorney involved to protect your legal rights. And that first example I gave you where my client was getting kind of bullied by the local government agency, that's an example. And so your land surveyor needs to know enough about the law to understand when a lawyer is needed. And that's important. 2, she needs to be able to provide help to your land attorney. So when you get a land attorney on board, depending on the land attorney, your land surveyor is going to want to help your attorney understand the circumstances, the facts on the ground, the survey and land title legal principles that might apply to your situation based on the facts on the ground. And then, your attorney's going to make the final decision about how those principles apply, but the surveyor can help in that process. And finally, 3, your surveyor, she needs to understand how current law impacts her work for you, because the law changes. So when she's dealing with unwritten rights, or she's trying to process a subdivision for you, or she's working on a lot line adjustment, or you need to get some land annexed and you're dealing with LAFCO here in California, whatever the circumstances are, she needs to understand how the law governs her work, how regulatory agencies and courts and other attorneys are going to evaluate her work. And she needs to understand that part of the reason because she wants to be effective for you, but also because she wants to put you in solid legal footing in the event that you do need to get an attorney involved at some point. And there's been a number of times when I've seen clients be put in a bad legal position because their surveyor didn't understand the law and the attorney got involved too late. And so those are all good reasons. If you're going to choose a boundary surveyor or private land planner, don't hire a surveyor that just builds skyscrapers or stadiums. You want to hire a boundary surveyor that has invested some time and some energy into understanding the law, and somebody that knows how to research and read the law, case law and code, zoning ordinances, subdivision regulations. And so make sure if you're going to hire a land surveyor for a real estate project that you're getting somebody with the right expertise. Not all surveyors are created equal. And yes, absolutely yes, as Mr. Lucas points out, a land surveyor should have a basic understanding of real estate law.